Hey Alex,
Hey, Patrick.
another week has come to an end. It's been, I'm so tired from that week we just spent in Germany.
Yeah, I know. It was really crazy how we were all able to fly there and cover the Gamescom conference and then get back here in time to do this show. It was pretty impressive, I
It's
think.
really just the dedication we show our audience. I hope they appreciate the little things that we do for them.
They should, damn it. They should be very happy that we are able to handle this kind of travel with so much poise, I
Have you
think.
have you ever been to Gamescom?
Yeah, I've been a couple of times. I did the last Leipzig one, and then I don't know if it was yeah, it might have been the first Cologne one. So I haven't been back since then, but I did those two.
I've only been, I only went to the Leipzig one. That was the old one, right?
Yeah, it was.
It
Yeah,
was it was weird
Leipzig.
because it felt like you went to a fake German town. Like I know I
Yeah,
was in Germany, but everything about Leipzig is it's a tiny, basically a convention town in
right.
the middle of nowhere. Like, but to get there, you have to go through fields, and it truly is in the middle of nowhere. And then because of that, it felt like this fake like it just felt like I was going to the Renaissance fair and like they did this pop up German town. So
Well,
let's go get
it's
some Kolsch.
yeah, the term I always use is the German equivalent of going to Columbus, Ohio. Like you would never ever
oh,
go
oh,
there.
sick burn,
You would
Leipzig.
never ever go there unless it was for a convention or something very specific. It's not a town that you would ever go out of your way to go to, but it is a place that houses these sort of like, group gathering kind of things because oh god, someone please come to our town. We have all these look at these giant concrete Eastern Bloc buildings that are left over from the Cold War and that's about all we have. Sorry.
And it's an interesting show because it has there are some shows like, for example, Tokyo Game Show has a business day and then consumer days. So
Yeah.
there are separate days so that kind of like the press can get in and do their thing. Then there are things like E3 that have press hours. So there is some sort of segregation based on sort of who you are and why you're there, what kind of business you need to get done. Whereas like Gamescom has like an actual business section. Like it is split into two shows
Right.
essentially, and so you'll see like people like John Drake and others on Twitter talking about like, oh, thank God I'm not in the consumer section because that's where the madness is. That's where the PAX on steroids is
Right.
happening, as opposed to the business area where traditionally that's kind of where if we were going to Gamescom, that's where we probably spend most of our time because that's where like the private demos are happening. That's where the business meetings are happening. So I think it's kind of interesting that they actually split it in that way. I mean, E3 has meeting rooms and sort of a thing, but Gamescom like specifically delineates between the two of those.
Yeah, and I don't remember if it was always that way or not. I do remember at least the Leipzig year having to. I mean, granted, when I was there, I was working the show floor, like I was working on harmonics. So, like, there were a lot of. I had to deal with a lot of people. There were a lot of people. The first year, I was off in some back room somewhere with EA because they didn't want to actually spend any money or have us, really doing it. So we were in this tiny little room in the back of the EA booth, me and like three other harmonics people and they would just kind of usher press people in, and we were totally away from everything. The other year was the Beatles thing. We had a giant stage on the floor, and there were just like tons and tons of people like kind of swarming us and complaining about, "I do not have more metal songs. Where's the metal? I want to play more Metallica."
Or like Metallica covers of Beatles songs.
Exactly. Yes. So yeah, Gamescom's a
Yeah.
weird show. It's always been a weird show, and I would like to go back someday, but I don't know if I'm quite ready for it yet.
Yeah, it's truly tough because sort of the way it falls is just before PAX, and it's we have a choice to not go, so we don't go.
Yeah,
It's,
it's
I
nice to
mean
have that
it's
choice.
it is like if I went, I'd have fun, we'd get good stuff out of it. But if I don't have to go, if I can just enjoy my August a little bit more, I'm not. You're not gonna see me squeal too hard that I don't have to go to Gamescom. Plus, if I had to choose a show that I have to go to, like that's not E3, but is a big trade show, I'd always pick TGS over Gamescom. But that's just
Certainly,
me.
certainly.
So I don't know. There are a bunch of the big news kind of has already been covered. The other guys did a live stream earlier this week over Sony's press conference. So we kind of already have gone over that stuff. I thought it was interesting and strange that Microsoft had a presentation and a press event, ostensibly, but did not live stream it, but then put up the video later on their channel on YouTube. And you could sort of get a sense of why they didn't, because it's much smaller spectacle. It's Phil Harrison and Phil Spencer on stage walking through the stuff, and it's a small group. So, you know, compared to what Sony was doing, obviously it looks a little not flimsy, but they're going for a different scale. But man, you know, without necessarily talking about the announcement Sony or Microsoft went over, just in presentation alone, like Sony came away with just, I guess, another complete home run in terms of who came to the show, totally owned the show, and then moves on from this with momentum. Because even though Microsoft had some interesting announcements, and they announced the the independent publishing at Xbox, you know, whether you want to call it a policy reversal or you want to call it introducing a new program, you know, Microsoft introduced a program that will hopefully introduce games to their platform. Sony got on stage and announced a bunch of games, and they showed games that are coming and games that will be playable in the next 12 months. And while Microsoft's policies are encouraging, at the end of the day, you know, what really matters is that Sony showed up with a bunch of games.
I mean, and yeah, to be fair, you know, it was definitely a lot more games from like the indie set, which is something that they pushed a lot at E3. And I'm certainly not complaining about the slate of games that they put in there, like the new Binding of Isaac, Hotline Miami 2, all that kind of stuff. And like those are all games I am very much looking forward to. The thing I find interesting is that I don't know if it's for lack of available stuff or if it's just that, you know, this is just kind of the direction they're going in right now. It does feel like Microsoft has a much greater concentration on sort of like the bigger, more high budget stuff in terms of like what they're really pushing right now, whereas Sony is just like all about this like incredible slate of indie games. Believe me, again, I'm not trying to like, you know, downgrade that stuff at all. It's just it's an interesting split between the two, and I'm not really, you know, I didn't necessarily I expected this to be the time when Sony was like, okay, and by the way, here's a few more of like the big budget things to go with all these great indie things that we showed you at E3. And I was like, no, we have a lot more of that stuff. Also, we're dropping the price on the Vita November 15th. Come on, get at us. Let's do it. And I was surprised by that.
Yeah, and I think that's going to be where the rubber hits the road on this stuff in the fall, where I think I'm with you. I'm, you know, as a game player, you know, and especially as someone that really, you know, champions and loves, you know, independent games and smaller, you know, personal experiences. You know, Sony is speaking my language. You know, all aboard the Sony train in terms of what they want to convey on their platform, the games they want to talk about. But in this increasingly fragmented market, is that necessarily the bet to be making when you want to sell consoles? You know, Journey is one of my favorite games of all time. Does Journey move consoles? No. At least I don't. I doubt it. You know, I don't have data in front of me, but that's the sort of, you know, critical buzz game that makes you glad you own a PS3. But I don't know if that's necessarily one that makes you go out and buy one, especially if you're Joe Schmo. And you know, what you consider a gamer, you know, is, you know, like I said, increasingly fragmented. It's hard to nail down exactly what the audience even is anymore. But I don't necessarily think Microsoft has a bad, you know, obviously start off the wrong foot, bad policies. Let's put all that aside. Their big bet on AAA and getting more of those games on their platform, pushing those, having more of those exclusive to the Xbox One, you know, I don't know if that's necessarily a bad idea, especially when you see the sort of fervor that Titanfall is generating. You know, it's not a launch game, but it's you know, launch window, spring, if they manage to hit that. And you know, I think it's going to be interesting to see how that plays out. Sony is certainly winning hearts and minds right now, but do hearts and wines, they could send me wine.
Yeah.
Hearts and minds, I don't know. Does that sell consoles in the fall? Does that sell consoles 12 months from now? I don't know. You know, and that's what I think is going to be really interesting to see what happens, because at this point they've both committed to their sort of philosophies, and now, you know, sales numbers is where that's going to kind of see who made the right bets.
Well, and the other thing is, so we now know what the launch lineups are for both the Xbox One and the PS4. Which I mean, some of these are not necessarily at launch, but they are before the end of the year games. But you look at like what's actually exclusive between the two platforms. It's like Sony has Knack, they have Drive Club, they have Killzone. And I think that's it as far as like the exclusive stuff. You go to Microsoft and it's like there's Crimson Dragon, Dead Rising 3, Forza, Loco Cycle, which we still don't know a hell of a lot about, Rise, which it's
There's more. There is more, and
yeah.
all you really need is one real standout. And right now I might put my money on Crimson Dragon or something of that being like Crimson Dragon might not move consoles, but
certainly not.
Would you play a next gen Panzer Dragoon? Like I would.
Yes, I mean yes, of course I would. But I also I'm the sort of idiot that will buy both consoles anyway. So like
yeah, we're not Brad Shoemaker. We're not going to wait 2 years to pick up our launch machines. Yeah, I will be there day one as well. I like being there, part of the conversation. I like being there when it sucks.
Yes.
Like, I understand, like sort of Brad's stance of like I'm gonna wait till it's cheaper and I'm gonna wait, especially if you've got a high-end PC, right? Like that allows you to make that call a hell of a lot easier than if you don't have a high-end PC, because he's gonna be able to play the standout games like Watch Dogs and games like that on a machine he already owns. Whereas I like being there on the ground floor. Like I want to see the dirtiness. I want to see the fuck ups. I want to be there to experience that as it happens, because I think that is important to me just for like kind of the job I do, but also I think it's just a lot of fun.
Yeah, and apparently I forgot to mention Killer Instinct. So yes, Killer Instinct's on that list too. The thing for me, I'm noticing, and yes, Microsoft has more, but I feel like this is even more than the last generation, which was pretty heavy on this stuff. There are a lot of multi-platform ports coming around this thing, and I'm not just in like I'm not surprised by that at all, but I'm actually surprised at how many of them there are. It seems like this is going to be the fall of the dichotomy between the current gen and the next gen ports. Like there's just going to be a real heavy load of those in a way that I'm not. From what I remember about that last time, those ports were, I mean, in the exception of something like a Watch Dogs, which is clearly being developed kind of for next gen and will probably be kind of scaled back a little bit. Like when you go into like all these sports games and all this other stuff, there's a lot of padding in here, man. There is a lot of padding. These games are not like NBA Live 14, I don't know, NBA 2K14 for next gen, I don't know, like I don't see a whole lot here that really speaks to me as someone who actually wants to play games. Like, I'm with you. I want it to be in when it sucks, but I also feel like I'm just not seeing a whole lot here that's really getting me very excited. I don't know about you. Do you feel that way at all?
I'm holding out hope for Dead Rising 3. I have been encouraged by... I think they made the right move in terms of how they've been marketing that game since its unveiling. When that first trailer they showed was very much... sort of a shot across the bow at the mainstream. Like, man, look at all these zombies. We're telling a dark, gritty story. Like, come check out our zombie game. And there was an immediate backlash of, hey, guys, well, then go make a game that isn't Dead Rising. That's fine. Go make your zombie game. But Dead Rising, to a lot of people is a much goofier game set within sort of this dark context. And that's part of the reason why it's so much fun is because of the contrast between those two tones. And since then, they've done... I think a really good job of just showing like this game's going to be goofy. It may have a darker, even darker tone than what you're used to in the past, but there's going to be lightsabers and you're going to be able to put on a night costume, and so I'm hopeful about where that game is going, and it's the kind of game that because so much of the mechanics are already established that they're just doing pure iteration, and for a launch game might be able to skate by on something that's familiar, but that becomes much more impressive just due to the scale of it. And so I'm hopeful that Dead Rising can maybe pull sort of a repeat punch in terms of sort of an impact, at least early on in the next gen cycle. But yeah, that's sort of a gamble, and I'm excited for it, but not like busting down the doors ready to play it. I'm mostly interested for the experience and the interfaces and that stuff. The games right now, there's a good chance I'll play a lot of those, on the PC, barring any
Right.
surprise announcements or sort of weird things we haven't heard about that come at the last minute. But I will say, to your point about a lot of cross-gen stuff, really did like what Sony announced at Gamescom in terms of what's going to happen for people that purchase these cross-gen games, especially the ones that are coming out ahead of the next-gen versions. Like, for example, so they announced that a number of publishers are opting in to provide significant discounts to people that purchase the PS3 version if they want to upgrade to the PS4 version when that launches in November. And the first company to sort of reveal exactly how it's going to work is Activision, saying if you buy Call of Duty Ghosts for $10, get the PS4 version. I mean, that's incredible. I think that is a very, very fair way to handle a pretty awkward situation of these fans want to be there on day one. To ask them to wait is crazy, and they already have these machines. But I think $10 is a completely acceptable upgrade charge for getting access to that complete game on a new platform, especially since it seems like across the board, developers are finding ways to make sure that your stats and your characters carry over. So it's not even like you're starting from square one in terms of what level you're at and your loadouts and things like that. I think that's all fantastic, and it's happening much smoother than I expected it to.
Well, let's wait until they actually have to execute all this stuff before we talk about how smooth it is, because you never know how this might fall the fuck apart at any given moment.
All right, let's see. Well, what do you got? You got anything? Any headlines on your end?
We talked about a bunch of this Gamescom stuff. I think the most interesting piece of news that's come out in the last day or so, and perhaps unsurprising, is that Steve Ballmer is finally retiring from Microsoft. The man who he's been CEO since 2000, been with the company in various forms for many years, has. Within the next 12 months, will be retiring from the company. I do not know exactly what this means for the greater scope of Microsoft, in the sense that they've already started this kind of corporate shakeup with people like Madrick leaving. People blame Ballmer a lot for some of the stagnation at the company, the way this whole thing has kind of been going over the last several years, and I'm kind of curious. Does this actually matter all that much for Microsoft? Like, can they actually, obviously they can get someone else in there who maybe is, a different mentality, but they're still going to want, a lot of the plans and a lot of the things they're working on are still going to go into production, regardless as to who replaces him. So I'm curious, what kind of impact this might actually have on the company.
I mean, it's, short term, probably very little. Any person that comes in is going to be sort of steering the ship that is already headed in a certain direction. But certainly you can say, sort of outside of Xbox, Microsoft as a corporation has had some pretty historical trouble executing their ideas. Like, they take a lot of risks if you look at the different things they've tried. Some of it is, perhaps a little, chasing the dragon, a little bit copycat. You look at things like Bing and the Surface. But they're trying things, and it's just a matter, the execution seems to be where they're struggling, and getting it to market. Windows Mobile, not something I use, but anyone that does use it seems to like it quite a lot. And you've seen its design and sort of spread to other platforms. The new iOS 7 has certainly taken some cues from there. So there are good ideas and things happening at Microsoft outside of the Xbox division, but it seems like a company that is definitely in need of a shakeup. But at a company that's big, with that much legacy that is tied up into things like Office and Windows, so how much can you do? That's really hard for me to say. It's really hard to know, and especially when you consider a company like Microsoft could make no changes to their existing business model, and they would still make tons of money. They may not be the market leader or the innovation leader that they have been in the past, but their legacy products will carry them for a very long time, and I don't know. I'm curious to see who they name, and whether I think who they name is, sort of will say everything about that move in terms of whether Ballmer leaves, choosing a successor that will disrupt what he has already put in place, and sort of just reaffirms what he's created, or he picks someone to push those things through, and then also change the company and maybe realign themselves to get ahead of the game instead of just chasing everything that the rest of Silicon Valley has been doing for the last 10 years. But
Well, and the one thing that people were saying is that no matter what this ends up being, Microsoft is still very, very much in the devices and services, direction, no matter what. Like that is where they are headed, and whoever they end up picking will probably be someone that has some experience in those, in those fields. So, in the grander scheme of things, maybe this isn't a massive shift for the company. There was someone in the chat just pointed out 9% raise in Microsoft stock today. So, maybe there is some benefit to getting some fresh blood in there. I don't know.
some blood. There's blood in the water for Steve Ballmer, I guess.
Yeah. Well, it was probably long overdue at this point.
If there is a game convention, not Gamescom, just a game convention, you will see a headline where someone will ask, "Yo, man, what's up with Last Guardian?" Which at this point, I'm tired of it. I'm never gonna ask that question again. I'm done. You put me in a room with Shuhei Yoshida, and I am not gonna ask because at this point, it's futile. There's no reason to ask. Every answer we get is just sort of.
It's still in active development. It is still in active development.
I guess. So the latest headline is that I guess in an interview with Famitsu, it actually didn't come out from Gamescom, but just around the same time, Famitsu Ueda was asked about the status of the project and sort of like looking back on Eco and Shadow of the Colossus, and he said that it's still still in development, earnest development was his phrasing, but that Knack and Puppeteer are taking priority over in Japan. Which, if let's assume Last Guardian is now a PS4, 2014-2015 game. It makes sense that there would be other projects that are scheduled for this fall to take priority. So I think the headlines have been perhaps slightly hyperbolic, given that it would make sense that these games that are coming out this year are taking priority over something that is clearly not coming out anytime soon. And yeah, I'm tired of talking about it. I am. Until Sony and Team Eco or whatever that studio is called now, or the makeup of it, wants to show me something else about that game, I'm done with it. I'm looking forward as much as everyone else. Eco and Shadow of the Colossus are some of my favorite games, but it seems futile to sit around getting distressed over a game that at this point might as well be vaporware, and until they prove that it's not, I'm going to stop spending my time worrying about it.
For my purposes, I've been done with that game for a very long time. And it's not because, I don't have any interest or anticipation for it. It's just that every piece of news, like you said, has been the same piece of news. Yes, we are still working on it. Yes, we are still working on it. And it just... I don't care, because they haven't actually shown like a meaningfully playable game like ever. They have shown demos of things that looked interesting, maybe, I don't know, but in terms of like something that people can actually put their hands on and interact with and do stuff with, we've never really seen anything of any substance out of that. And so for people like, I understand why people are obsessed with it. It's a team that has done some very good work in the past. Ueda has a reputation as being something that people have a lot of fondness for. It does, like that. Those early demos, those early videos did look very impressive, but it has been so long since they have offered us even a smidgen of worthwhile information or just playable anything that. Why would you sit there and continue to obsess over this thing that might as well not even exist? If it comes back and they show a game that is, somewhere in the direction of complete and it turns out to be something kind of great, then by all means, resume your fandom. But if you're just going to sit there and you're going to latch on to this one game that will likely, I'm going to say 60% chance we ever see this thing come out in any capacity at most, then I just feel like you're just losing your mind for no reason. Like there are tons of other games you could be focusing your attention on, and I say this also to headline writers. You don't need, like, I know you probably get comments every single time you write that same headline, but we're done. You got to be done for a while. Like don't pay attention to them for a little while, and maybe they'll come back with something. Like don't keep asking them over and over again because they feel like they can just keep giving you the same bullshit answer over and over again and still be, satisfy people.
Well, it's just like when you go into these interview situations, you you're getting 30 minutes, an hour if you're lucky, and especially if these are translated interviews, you're getting a handful of questions to be asked, and at this point, I'm done asking about The Last Guardian. I just don't. I don't think it's useful information to my audience. I don't care as a player anymore. So when they want to start talking about it, I will be happy to discuss it. But until then, like, they are joining the Ubisoft's daily emails about Splinter Cell, and you have gone to my spam folder. I'm just done.
I think that is totally reasonable. Well, I don't really have any other headlines, but I did have the chance to go see a couple of different games over the last week.
Oh, did you?
I did, yes.
You saw the Wolf Among Us, but can you talk about that?
Yeah, I can.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, Marco's up. I can talk about it. So yeah, that was one of the two I saw. Telltale was in town, where I guess they were debating going to Gamescom, and then they just kind of decided not to. But they were in town showing to some press here in New York. The first episode of Fables, which they have titled The Wolf Among Us, which is another comic book adaptation, one I had never really read. I guess it was a Vertigo series about, these characters known as fables, just like characters from all different walks of fairy tales and whatever, kind of living together in a sort of modern, secretive, society where they kind of have to pass for human, among the normal society. And it's told as sort of like a gritty kind of detective noir type thing. The actual comics, I think, take place in like the 2000s, but this game takes place in the pre-Giuliani New York City, of the 80s. So it's like got a real rundown, kind of messed up look to it. And you play the game as the big bad wolf, known as Bigby, who is sort of the sheriff of all things Fabletown. And there's a whole murder mystery that takes place throughout the first one, involving a kind of mysterious fable woman who falls victim initially to the kind of drunken beatings of the woodsman, and you're kind of there to sort of regulate. And you meet a bunch of different characters throughout the thing, like Mr. Toad is there, Ichabod Crane, Beauty is like the office manager of all things Fables, and she like works with you on a lot of stuff. Mechanically, it looks very much, kind of like The Walking Dead did. It's you're investigating things. It's a lot of conversational, choices. If there is combat, it's all kind of quick time based. But it actually had a much. There was one particular fight scene with the woodsman that seemed like it had a much more fluid way of working. Like, you would grab him, and then you would kind of like take him over to one part of the room and slam his head into something, at which point he would grab a weapon, and then he would come at you, and then you would have to dodge him and grab him and move him to another part of the room, kind of stuff. It was a pretty good, like for an adventure game, it was a pretty well choreographed fight scene.
Do you have a sense of, Walking Dead was a game, obviously it had a fantastic story, but sort of the linchpin of The Walking Dead was moral choices and the sort of the story taking precedent over puzzles and sort of more traditional aspects of an adventure game, at least how we had previously conceived of adventure games. And that stuff was at the forefront over anything else. Does it feel like those sorts of things are still happening in The Wolf Among Us? Like, is The Wolf Among Us a game that is defined by player choice in the same way that The Walking Dead was? Because that was certainly not the case of, like the Monkey Island games they did,
Sure.
Sam & Max, those are much more traditional. So do you have a sense of where they're going for with this one?
Yeah, it's different in the sense that Bigby is very much a defined character. Like, you're not doing a Lee Everett thing where you're sort of building him on your own kind of personality depending on what dialogue choices you make and that kind of stuff. But there are distinct choices that you have to make in terms of like how you address people, how you deal with them, how you choose to handle certain situations. And then there's one, which I won't get too into because it gets into the spoiler stuff they didn't want me to talk about, but there's a choice at the very end of the demo they showed where you're basically presented with two situations. You can either go notify this one character about his wife being dead and, maybe find out, like, if he was involved or not, or you can go choose to help this other character who's in more immediate danger but might not necessarily be in a situation that ties to your case. You kind of have to decide like which way you're going to go, and depending on which way you choose, the other side of it will play out somewhat differently than if you had chosen that one as the first one. So there, they are emphasizing that there is a kind of moral choice in the game. There is definitely that sort of, split narrative kind of thing. But it's not necessarily exactly the same way they did it in The Walking Dead. It's maybe a slightly different bent on the idea.
Yeah, I do not envy the writers and designers working on that game, because I have to imagine when it was conceived, there was no way to know that The Walking Dead was going to be received in the way it was. And
yeah,
Walking Dead was a transformational project for Telltale and for all those people involved. And it's one thing to have to create a season 2 of The Walking Dead. That's its own set of challenges and expectations that you have to meet. But having this next project be, you watch the trailer and they're like, oh, from the creators of Game of the Year, Walking Dead, they're playing into it. They are leaning into the acclaim, as they should. They earned that. But that sets up some pretty hefty expectations, and Telltale stuff in the past has kind of quality-wise been a little erratic. And yeah, so I'm definitely curious. I'm like I think most everyone else, that I'm certainly going to give this first episode a shot. I love The Walking Dead. The Walking Dead is not going to start till sometime in the fall. We're getting pretty close to, I imagine, where we'll start hearing about that second season. But yeah, that's, are they going to have overlapping? Are they going to have two things going? Are they assumingly, if they follow the timeline they've been talking about for Walking Dead season 2, that's going to start, I think, they've said fall, but I assume if they're doing fall, they're going to aim for Halloween time. They're going to aim for Walking Dead's 4th season on AMC to come back, so they can kind of tie that in and ride some of that sweet demographic wave. And I don't know. It's going to be it's interesting. I'm going to be curious to see sort of what Act 2 or Act 3 of Telltale is, and how they handle sort of being this bigger player now that they have success and expectations that are far beyond just adventure gamers.
Well, here's what I will say is that from talking to them, it sounds like their team has grown quite a lot. So yeah, I would imagine that. So this is, I think, scheduled to hit in October, the first episode of Fables. It sounded like they basically have 2 different groups working on those different games, so there probably will be some overlap in that stuff. I will say that, as someone that thought Back to the Future was kind of interesting and Jurassic Park was kind of a disaster, this does not look like the early Telltale stuff. Like, in terms of the design and the sort of the storytelling and the characterization and stuff, this feels much more in the ballpark of Walking Dead. It's not the same exactly, and there are some key differences, just in terms of storytelling and direction and all that kind of stuff. But, what I saw of it looked really good. There were bugs and glitches, but it was all, preview build stuff. And, from a visual standpoint, it looked really good. From a mechanical standpoint, it seemed pretty interesting. And from a storytelling perspective, I was into it. They showed me a solid, I'd say 30, 40 minutes of whatever was going on in that episode, and it all looked really interesting. So I'm into it. As someone who did not even care about those comics one bit before I saw any of that stuff, I was like, yeah, I would totally play this. So.
Well, I think that was, I think for a lot of people that was the case with The Walking Dead as well. Obviously Kirkman's work is critically acclaimed, but I think far more people that played The Walking Dead played it because of the response from the people that did play it than it was, man, I'd really love to play, Robert Kirkman's The Walking Dead in video game form. Because you could also get survival instinct out of that.
Fair enough. And then the other game I managed to see, I actually saw this before I went to LA, was NBA 2K14. Unfortunately, not the next-gen version. They were only showing the current one. Patrick, are you much of an NBA fan at all?
No, I mean,
You're in Chicago, the Bulls,
Yeah,
hey.
So I follow the, I get on the bandwagon in the playoffs. Partially because I like football because it's 16 games. Every game means something, which means it gives you a pretty clear narrative to follow for a set number of teams. So I can follow multiple teams that have 16 games. I can do that in my head. I have enough time to do that. Basketball, like baseball, like hockey, has so many games, and I don't have the time to necessarily watch those. In addition to that, having been on the West Coast for the last 6 years, when those games are on is just I'm not in a position to watch them. It's often in the middle of the workday or at the sort of tail end of the workday, and I can't pay attention. But now that I'm back in Chicago, and the Bulls are, a team to be rooted for, it was not the case for a number of years, but, Derrick Rose is coming back this fall. It's a team to pay attention to, and I think being in Chicago and then also having friends that are into it, I should be able to get dragged into being more interested than I have in the past, because I want to be. Football is about as much as I can muster on my own, and I think with other people and being in Chicago, I'm planning on. I mean, because Chicago's, Blackhawks are good, Bulls are good, Bears are fine. They're not terrible. We're not the Lions, so I'll take that. But anyway, so yeah, do you think it's concerning that they're not showing the next-gen version at all?
I think it's
weird?
Literally because they just don't have the kits to show those games on right now. I mean, it's concerning in the sense that next-gen versions of sports games are never very good the first time around. Madden, Key Point, FIFA, the NBA stuff, like NBA 2, like whatever the NBA 2K one was that showed up on 360 at first, was literally the same game as the other one, but with just like slightly better animations and like everybody was shinier. But it was fine, and that's the thing, is that it's just next gen is always sort of like the starting point. So we're kind of rebooting a lot of stuff. We're throwing a lot of things in there. I'm not really that worried about it, because this year's game looks fine. As far as the current platforms go, it's definitely building off what they did last year. They're bringing back the crew mode, which is like an online kind of multiplayer group thing, which is they haven't done in like 4 years. And this year, LeBron James is not only the cover man, but the guy who picked all the soundtrack songs. So they're
great.
Yeah. So if you want to listen to LeBron James's iPod, basically, you will be able to in that game. But it still looks really good. They've fixed a lot of animation stuff that was starting to drive me crazy in that game. It still has the best sports commentary of any game ever, really. And it's basketball. If you like basketball, it is still very, very, very good basketball from what I played. So.
Yeah, it definitely seems like, outsider looking in, especially on the game side, that EA has a real steep hill to climb. Not only have they had trouble just shipping a game, but they are going up against a competitor that has, seems to have been at the top of their game in terms of making these basketball titles for a number of years now.
But the ball handling. There's going to be such good ball handling in the EA game. They've talked about it. There's going to be the ball handling will be exquisite. I
mean, and what it bums me out is that what you've seen happen in basketball, which is sort of, every couple of years there's kind of a swing of the pendulum back and forth. At least there's some semblance of competition, at least, and it seems to help with these basketball games. And it does, it just makes me wish the game that I would rather see that in is in football, and the fact that there is zero competition there, remains distressing and a bummer. Because not to say that the team that works on Madden doesn't work hard, but you work differently when you are stacked against someone who's going to take dollars away from you.
Most definitely. And, I will have a review of this year's Madden probably sometime next week. We'll see how that goes.
All right. Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Do you
want to get to else?
I was going to get to a couple of short headlines before we jump into user questions. Not a whole lot other stuff going on. So
yeah. Well, while Alex pulls those up, if you have any questions, just at me in the chat at Patrick Klupik, and I will start queuing some of those up, and we'll get to those after we go through some of the headlines.
So I forget who it was that said this, but someone at Sony was talking about how basically at this point, by the time Gran Turismo 6 gets to PS4, they might just turn it into Gran Turismo 7. Does that make sense to you, Patrick?
As a Gran Turismo expert,
yes.
Yeah, I don't. I don't know. Polyphony Digital works on their own schedule, I guess.
Yeah.
I guess, that guy is the last designer at Sony that is basically, I guess, allowed to do whatever he wants. I would be genuinely curious one day to read a profile about that studio, its relationship with the Sony mothership, because it just seems like Sony used to be a company that gave a really long leash to a number of those developers and has kind of tightened that leash over the years, especially in Japan. That's part of the reason that my understanding is The Last Guardian has kind of become the way that it is when they tried to rein that project in, and Gran Turismo still kind of is floating off on its own. I think it's bizarre that Gran Turismo is coming out on PS3, but it probably makes a lot of sense, you know, in terms of wanting to sell to a user base that has tens of millions of units as opposed to one that's just getting off the ground. But yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if yeah, they turned that into 7, because I think that studio doesn't, Polyphony doesn't, they're not a studio that half-asses, right?
Right.
And so the moment they start going down the line to up-res or HD or however you call it this time around, when you're sort of taking assets and upgrading them for a new set of hardware, my guess is they're just going to want to go the whole way. And when they start going the whole way, you know, maybe you just start calling that the new game at that point. You release it in 3 years. So
certainly. Hans Zimmer is doing the Beyond Two Souls score. Patrick, what's your favorite Hans Zimmer score?
He did the Batman ones, right?
Yeah.
Those are pretty good. The Inception soundtrack. That's, I don't know if I'd say all time. I'd have to go and actually look through his legacy, but
sure.
I guess of modern Hans Zimmer, the Inception soundtrack for at least a good year was like my go-to. I'm writing. I need to get this fucking review done. And I'm gonna write the shit out of this conclusion, because this is the most epic conclusion to a mediocre review that I have ever written in my life. I guess
that's fine if you're just into like his major label stuff or whatever. But you know, I'm really about the Hans Zimmer deep cuts. For me, I mean, I think the clear-cut favorite is the Hugh Grant, Julianne Moore pregnancy comedy 9 Months.
He did that? Wow,
yeah.
You gotta make your bills.
Yeah.
You gotta pay for your bills in between the big projects. That's funny.
Yeah. And last one, Ben Affleck as Batman, motherfucker. I don't even have an opinion. Do you have an opinion? I don't even care.
I wish the internet would shut up. Who cares?
Yeah.
I haven't seen Man of Steel, so I guess I can't really comment. According
to Rory, you kind of don't need to. So there you go.
I'll wait till it's out on. You know, I'll pay $6 to watch it on iTunes. That's how I'll see that movie. But about Beyond, there were another interesting headline that was kind of bouncing around earlier this week is, so if it has an app for iOS and Android, I'm going to read and make sure I'm getting this absolutely correct.
Yeah, it has an app that like turns the iPad or whatever into a game controller of some kind, right?
Yes. Yeah, so here's the story from Joystick. In multiplayer or solo, it has multiplayer, but let's move on from that. Beyond is playable with iOS and Android touchscreen devices with the Beyond Touch app. It's a free app that allows players to control a character. It's a blank slate with no buttons or on-screen sticks that players use like a touchpad. Slide one finger around the screen and the character moves. The game automatically switches to easy mode when a touchscreen controller is in use. Cage said the touchscreen feature is an attempt to reel in casual players or those who don't play games often. Most people are comfortable with a smartphone, though avid players will want to use the DualShock controller. Whatever you think of David Cage, whatever you think of Beyond, that is an incredibly smart idea.
It's interesting.
I don't know if it's going to work. It's certainly not going to apply to a whole swath of games.
No.
But he hits the nail on the head that there are probably game experiences that non-gamer types would be interested in having, but are put off by the controller. You know, that is absolutely the case for all sorts of people I know. But those people are used to phones, they are used to tablets, they are used to all sorts of devices that are incredibly complex but have created interfaces that are very easy to interact with. So the idea that we could maybe have our cake and eat it too, which is that to say that rather than dumbing down games at the expense of complexity, which is what I think gets people really upset sometimes of, well, it's going to have touchscreen controls or it's a touchpad version of this game. I'd rather just have a controller. It's like, well, what if we can have both? Like, what if there are certain types of experiences, certain types of games that actually make sense with both of those and that drop into maybe a different type of interface in order to accommodate people that want to have that experience but are afraid of, rightly so, of something that has, 12 to 15 buttons. There's a reason that's intimidating. And I hope it works. I think whether or not it does work may actually be irrelevant because I think the idea behind it is probably the first time you can say second screen feature and you have actually kept my attention for more than 5 seconds because I think he's on to something there, and I would like to see more games potentially explore that. Like, I think The Walking Dead, for example, right? So I played that. My wife was really into it, but the idea of giving her the controller, like, that's just going to be very intimidating. Like, she could come to grips with it, but if she could have played that game with a touch interface and it was still on the big screen, like, that's not impossible for that game. I think there are a number of games that would benefit from something like that. So, I mean, do you think I'm crazy? Like, I think that sounds like it could be a cool idea.
No, I don't think you're crazy. I think you're absolutely right that it is an idea that is absolutely worth pursuing. I don't know that I necessarily trust David Cage or that game to pull it off in a meaningful or helpful way, but I'm curious to see what they actually do, and I'm curious to see if other people actually, try this out in the future for other games. Like you said, Walking Dead is a good example of something that might be able to pull that off. I'm only skeptical just because everything I've played of Beyond thus far has kind of left me just sort of scratching my head going, I don't know. So I'm not necessarily convinced that a touch interface is what's going to, help that game in the end.
Yeah, I'm with you on that. I will play it because I did actually like Heavy Rain more so for its ambitions than for what was there, and so for the same reasons I will play Beyond. So is that all you got for headlines? Should we move on?
That
to
is all I
questions?
got right now. Let's just jump into the questions.
All right, let's see. There's maybe I can address this here. There's a bunch of people asking me what I'm going to do with Amnesia: A Machine for Pigs, which comes out in a couple of weeks.
Endurance run, Spooks endurance run.
Yeah, that is. I'm gonna have to talk about what exactly I do with that game with the rest of the guys. That's kind of a private conversation we need to have. We definitely have some pretty specific policies about what we do with brand new games versus games that are old.
Right.
And the idea that I would just turn on that game and start playing it, especially to start playing it as part of a premium feature that that people are paying to be a part of. That's a conversation we need to have. But I will acknowledge that I hear your calls to do something with that. I think that would be a lot of fun to play that game, but how exactly we do that, what form that takes, is sort of a larger conversation we need to have. But I definitely wanted to at least acknowledge to people that I've heard you guys asking about it, and believe me, I want and don't want to play that game just as much as you guys do.
Sure.
A lot of people asking. Okay, here's a good one because this was a headline I pulled up that I didn't get to. Kaiser asked thoughts on the pricing scheme of Killer Instinct, which is I had it in a headline. I want to say characters cost $5 in free-to-play version of Killer Instinct. So it'll be a free download at launch. It's got a single playable character. There's a $19.99 combo breaker pack that unlocks the full roster of 8 characters, and I guess 2 exclusive fighters that are not officially or initially available for purchase. There's also a $39.99 Ultra Edition, which bundles all the characters, accessories, costume packs, and the original arcade version of Killer Instinct.
So basically, the $40 version of the game is just the whole damn game.
That's everything with the DLC. It's basically like you're getting the game plus a season pass. And then for $20 you get all the characters, and then for free you get. I mean, it's weird. Like, it's a demo that you can then add on piecemeal, or pay $20 and get everything up front.
Yeah, that's weird. And I mean, we've heard all this stuff about the free-to-play version of Killer Instinct pretty much since they announced that game altogether. I didn't realize that game only had like 10 characters in it or whatever, with like the bonus characters and stuff, which is not really a lot for a fighting game. But I mean, I don't know. None of the Killer Instinct characters are really all that memorable to me anyway, so I guess maybe that's not as big of a deal. It ultimately, to me, it doesn't really matter. What matters is this actually a decent fighting game or not? Because they can throw in as many different pricing methods as they want, but like what little I played of it at E3, which was literally like 5 minutes, it seemed all right, but in terms of like a fighting game I would want to pay really much of any amount of money for, I'm still kind of unconvinced. So, maybe the free-to-play model is a way to get people who, like me, are totally unconvinced to get on board at some point. I'll just play that one character and see if I like it, and if I don't, then I won't. It's basically just a demo at that point, right?
Yeah, I'm definitely. when it comes to free to play, I have actually been pretty intrigued by what the MOBA scene has done. I think League of Legends and Dota 2 have what I think are the epitome of making free games that offer a lot of content, but that also entice and encourage people to pay for content that they want. So for Dota, all the characters are free, and then you pay for accessories. And in League of Legends, you get a set number of characters that you can play as, and then those rotate to another set. And if you want to pick one as your main, then you purchase that. And then if you, and I think both of those make a lot of sense. And I think Killer Instinct would be a far more fascinating free-to-play game if it rotated characters. Like, what if every week it switched to another one? So you can only play as one, but it would switch to another one. So you could, within a couple of, maybe a month or two, or however they handled it, experience the full breadth of the characters they developed for that game, but you're not going to be able to choose the one you want to play as. And if you want to do that, then you do buy that character, or you pay the $20 for access to everything. And that sounds way more compelling than paying $5 per character or paying $20 for the whole suite. And at least it's encouraging that they're taking what is rightly or wrongly an anticipated and cherished property, not in my eyes, but in some people's eyes. Although I will say I do love Killer Cuts.
Sure.
And rolling the dice with a different business model, and then otherwise you just figure it's a $20 game, right? Like if you want everything, you just pay the $20 and you move on with your life. So I think they could be doing more with it, but I do think it's interesting that this is the game. This is the game that you should choose to try something like this on, right?
Sure.
Like Killer Instinct is just interesting enough to
just
outsiders.
Memorable enough, I would say. Yeah, just remembered enough.
Like if you were to do this with a Halo or a Gears of War, there would be riots and you would have so much more trouble selling this to people. But Killer Instinct is like, and it's launched, so and like you'll get people on board to give it a shot at least because of those factors. So in that respect, I think it actually is pretty smart and at least interesting. Although like I said, I think they could do a little bit more with it.
So when Killer Instinct becomes a MOBA, you'll become interested in, is what you're saying?
Wow, Dead Island.
Yeah.
Became a MOBA. So who says you can't make a MOBA?
Fair enough. I say you can't make a MOBA, Patrick.
Okay, you're right. You're right. If you want to take my phrase at face value, you are absolutely correct. Here we go. Lost Archives. This is for you, Alex. Have not written it yet, but can you provide any thoughts on XCOM: The Bureau now that you have spent a little more time with it?
So I will have that review today because I'm like one mission away from finishing it at this point. It is a game that starts out very promisingly and has a very gradual downslide of interest from beginning to end that never really peaks or spikes at all. It's just kind of like a straight line that just kind of goes down a little bit. Mechanically, like combat-wise, it does some really neat stuff. The tactics stuff works pretty well. There's a nice array of abilities that each of your different agents can use. That it keeps things varied and fresh. The problem is, literally every battle takes place in exactly the same kind of arena environment where it's like you're walking through a narrow passageway, so no one's going to show up. Then suddenly you're in a big open area, and you're like, all right, find cover. Here are all the same types of cover points that we have in every other environment. Let's just, go through the usual motions with the same, dozen or so enemy types. And the story just dovetails into rote stupidity, I'd say 2/3 of the way through, and then never really completely recovers from it. So, I don't know. It's okay. I would say it is a very okay game. One that definitely feels like it was supposed to be something different, and then they scrapped just about everything and turned it into something a little bit more, I don't want to say standard, because it is a little bit different than like a lot of other tactical action games, but it does feel like it's trying to marry a lot of disparate parts and do so at a more hurried pace than its 7-year development cycle would certainly suggest.
Yeah, so, I would highly recommend actually Polygon alongside their review. Chris Plant did an exceptional piece of reporting, breaking down that game's very lengthy history. It's got a really fascinating origin, and in fact, multiple origins as it sort of went through a number of reboots. So that's definitely, you know, once Alex, your review goes up, that's a pretty great companion piece to get a sense of like, how do we end up with a game like this? Especially, you know, given that conversation we had earlier in the week about, you know, sort of, you know, not perfect games and like why they're not perfect. You know, it's stuff like that, you know, features like that that can give you that perspective. That actually reading stuff like that makes me want to play the game, because I feel it's cool to play a game and then be able to dissect it, you know, sort of alongside playing it. So you're playing it for different reasons, right? Like I'm playing, you know, a really good game like Saints Row 4 because I'm going to have a lot of fun with this, like whatever. Whereas like when I get around to playing the Bureau, it's going to be because I've read about its history and it's just like I got to know more about this. So I may not finish it, but you know, I would definitely want to play like 4 or 5 hours just to get a sense of like, oh, like this is this thing. So I think that's interesting.
It's too bad because it does start off promisingly. Like once they kind of introduce the atmosphere and the story and the setting and all that stuff, like it has, you know, I mean, it's X-Files set in the Mad Men universe. You know, it's a bunch of, you know, gruff.
You're gonna make me buy this game right now.
That sounds super great, but the problem is that it is also tied to this one overarching alien invasion storyline that's so all-encompassing that like. If it were more like, I feel like that game would be way more interesting if it was about smaller events and, you know, more investigation and, you know, combat in these like non-necessarily like world-ending scenarios. The problem is it's all so apocalyptic so quickly and so intensely that like they never really get to develop anyone. It's just, here are these characters, a bunch of them die very quickly. The ones that don't, they don't actually do all that much with. Once they finally get around to sort of explaining some of the significance of certain people, it's just really stupid. And it just doesn't have anything to say or do beyond, like, well, aliens are here, let's kill them. Right. And that's fine to a certain degree, but the gameplay isn't quite good enough or interesting enough to sort of hold it up beyond the scope of the kind of stupid story as it goes along. Like, I would totally play a more, like I said, like just a smaller scale version of this game where it's just you and your team going out investigating crazy alien shit throughout the 60s and whatever. But because they turn it into this, like, huge world-ending conspiracy right from the get-go, it's like there's no modulation between any of it. It's like everything is dire constantly, and none of the characters ever get any real chance to breathe. The guy you're playing seems like this really interesting, fascinating dude, but in the end, he's basically just, you know, young Clint Eastwood with the Bale Batman voice. Like, he doesn't really have any characteristics beyond that other than a vague sense of tragedy in his life. And I'm not going to get into the ending. I will just say, from what I'm predicting coming up to this last level, I don't have a lot of faith in it. So I'll leave it at that.
Kibbles points out, and my heart breaks as I say this because it will never happen. It says L.A. Noire combined with X-Files would be the best game, and I agree.
Yeah.
Sure, I agree.
Totally.
Or if Telltale made an X-Files game, X-Files. Nail also points out in the chat, characters can be earned through playing in League of Legends as well, 100% free. So the rotating characters was my understanding, but that was incorrect. I appreciate the clarification, Nail.
Also, Patrick, we are not allowed to get Telltale to play or to make other games until they make that Clue adaptation. I've been bugging them about for 2 years at this point. So that has to be their next thing.
Add it to the list. Why don't we close on this question, and then we'll get to our true closer about the podcast art. So Bane122 asked, you guys think Bethesda is making a mistake by having a subscription for Elder Scrolls Online? So one of the things that came out of Gamescom this week was that Elder Scrolls Online is going to, I believe, have these sort of standard $14.99 a month charge to play the game. You know, different games come with different amounts of time you get out of the box. I think the standard is usually 30 days, and then you start paying the monthly subscription. But this is a game that's going to be coming out basically as the subscription model is being largely abandoned. Even Blizzard has said that Project Titan, their next MMO, will not use the subscription model, and it sort of seems like at the point that Blizzard, the standard bearer of the subscription model, is abandoning it, that maybe other people should be too. So I don't know. What do you make of that?
It's weird. Like for as much as people seem to be moving toward this free-to-play thing, there is also this weird kind of like scarlet letter attachment to it, because I think because so many games have had to resort to it from the subscription model versus, kind of embracing it wholesale. And, in the case of something like Elder Scrolls, I mean, if I'm completely honest, I feel like the mistakes being made with Elder Scrolls Online mostly pertain to the making of Elder Scrolls Online. Like, that game, what little I've seen of it has not really, done a whole lot for me. And the people I know who are, like, hardcore Elder Scrolls fans who have played it have been sort of like, yeah, I don't really know where they're going with this. So in terms of, like, going to the subscription model, I mean, you can only really base that on demand. You have to know what kind of demand you have in front of you and what people are willing to pay. If they think that people are willing to pay $15 a month to play their MMO for, let's say at least 12 months, then, maybe there's some merit in that. Like, especially if they have, like, a free-to-play model kind of on the back burner that, like, they can kind of implement once subscriptions start to disappear, which, I mean, let's face it, every MMO eventually starts to lose subscriptions. But, in terms of this being some horrible mistake, I don't know. I mean, I don't really know what the deal with that game is overall, and, I can't really sit here and sit in judgment of what they're doing with their billing processes, even as I sit here completely kind of not really getting their basic game on any major level. So if they want to go subscription, great. Maybe also make that game a little bit better before you, do that. Just a thought.
My gut reaction to the decision to continue to have a subscription model is the same reason that EA chose to have a subscription model for Star Wars. They're going to have a subscription model up front because Skyrim is such a success, and the Elder Scrolls name carries enough weight that you will get X amount of players that will buy in up front. So why not get that money up front and then make the pivot to free-to-play once the numbers start to go down? So, sure. Is that the right call? I have to imagine they've run the numbers. I don't think at this stage of the game you would engage with a subscription model unless you had run the numbers and that made the most sense, like that they have done enough data crunching to know that, well, we can retain X. Like, Star Wars seems like the perfect test case for what they're trying to do with this game. So they must have looked at that and said, hey, we can pull that off too, because there are going to be people that pay up front to play a game called Elder Scrolls Online. Like, that should be awesome, right? Like, yeah. You play Skyrim, and you're like, if I could play with other people, that could be great. So curious to see how that plays out, how long they sort of stretch out the idea that they're going to charge a subscription fee. But I mean, don't let them fool you. 12 months later, if not less, that game will be free to play.
Probably.
It's just a matter of when that happens.
So we're in the 12 to 18 month window is where I would put it.
I think so too. All right. So as people know, we last week issued a call for people to create some podcast art, and there has been a wonderful thread going in the forums where people have made some really amazing pieces of work for all sorts of reasons. And we have picked one. We have settled on one. Well, we've settled on two.
Yes.
And there was a last-minute addition that threw off what was to us the clear winner. And so I'm going to rotate through them right now. And the chat's this video is on a pretty significant lag. So we'll go through them, and then maybe we'll answer one more question in the chat, and then we're going to throw up a poll for people to vote on which one they want. So.
All right.
Theoretically,
let's go through here.
Theoretically, the screen sharing thing will. Where is it?
To be fair, we're experimenting with this. We tried this earlier, and it took a minute. So.
Okay. Wait. I gotta get to the beginning.
Yes.
Okay. I think I got it. Here we. What about that? Did it work?
I can see that.
Okay, you can see it. Okay.
Yeah.
So you can see the art. See Bombin in the A.M.
I'm gonna say that's maybe not the one.
No. This is the first one. We're gonna go through all the submissions.
Yes.
So this is the first one. Well, we look pretty good in there. I'm not gonna. Where is your photo from?
That's my official CBS Interactive corporate photo.
Right after we got acquired. That's right. Okay.
Yes.
That's from me at my wedding. Bombin in the A.M. What's with the ice cream? Oh, scoops. I got you.
Scoops. Do you see the scoops? Do you get it?
I am.
Yeah.
Oh
Good
my
for
God!
you.
Did you really just do that?
Yeah.
Did you really just do that?
I did that.
This is a morning show.
This is a morning show.
That's what I just like that. I can't tell if that wolf is saying hello, or if the wolf is tenderly. Okay, all right. Oh, Jesus Christ! I don't like where this is going. Oh no! Oh no! We're gonna get fired.
Good.
This was an early. I looked at this one and thought, like, this is it. Like, this is. How can we top this one? I mean, I look like a badass. Like, I wouldn't want to see me in an alley, and there is no way that is true in real life. And your eyes. You've got like a real sadness behind them. Like, I don't know what's happened to you, but
it's a deep sadness.
And I will say, didn't notice it up front, but the Chicago skyline and the New York skyline, really, really nice touch.
Very important. Very important stuff to have in there.
So that is well done. I like this one. It's simple.
It's got
a little clock on the background. I like the headphones. I do wear those Astro A40s. They're probably a little much for something like this, but I like them. And this just, this is all right. Simple. Just cut right to the core of it. Cut right to the core of it. This one is, man, I don't even. Oh. Well done. Well done, sir. All right. Well, I mean, I like that interpretation of me.
It is horrifying. This is horrifying.
Your eyes are just. I don't know what I'm going to use it for, but this will get used elsewhere.
Yeah.
Okay, and this was a real late. God.
That's the one I like.
God damn it. God damn it. This was the last submission. This wasn't even going to be in the lineup we were talking about. And I thought, well, I should look at the thread one more time. And this was a very late addition. But man, that caricature of me is something else. And then you are just the saddest little wolf.
Look at my eyes. They got the bulging eyes in there so perfectly.
Oh, that's good. So there's this, and then this was going to be sort of the one we settled on, which is why it's at the end of this list here. I mean, just it got the little patch on the actual wolf, which is a nice touch, and I've got that sweet hat that doesn't quite look like a fedora, so I'm not a total asshole. But so these are our two. So the two that I'm swapping between are the ones that
I like the last minute one. I think that was the one that really did it for me. I think the sheer detail of the art is what makes that
really
one for me.
It's really something else.
Also, I just don't like you in the hat. The hat is bothersome to me. It doesn't work for me.
And the cartoonish one is. I feel like maybe a little more in line with the ridiculous nature of the title of this podcast.
Yes. It is so stupid. It is the right kind of stupid for this.
So should we just not even do a poll? Should we just
let's throw the poll up and just see what happens.
Okay. I mean, I think I know which one is going to win. So, let's see. We'll call this Cartoon and Fedora.
Cartoon and Fedora, yes.
So cartoon if you want this one, Fedora if you want this one. God damn it, Alex. What even is that? Is that Google effects?
Yeah, it's just using the shitty Google effects stuff. I'm not even, it's not even anything good.
Oh, someone already, I think Rory did a poll in the chat.
Yeah, he did.
All right. So is that, wait, winner is red? What does red mean?
I have no idea. I think
No, I think 152.
yeah.
I think that won. I think that won. Well, thanks.
Oh, everyone really wants that Skyline one, apparently.
Well, you know what? Why don't we do this?
I don't like it.
We have a couple of really great entries. I think those three are absolutely our top entries. You know what? Why we don't have to choose one. We can rotate between them. And maybe that's what we'll do. How about, let's say, every once in a while every couple months or so we'll switch between that art. So everyone is a winner. But I want to die. I want to die.
Why?
But
this is exactly what we talked about when we conceptualized this show.
You're right. Where's the river of tears? And it's just graphic sound. I don't know how do I put a funny hat? I'm not gonna open this. What am I doing? I'm not clicking that. So the signed Jurassic Park. Look at that, wrapped. That is fresh. So I will sign that, and that will go to. Oh man, I should pull up the thread. Give me 1 second, so I can announce the use. Oh jeez, God damn it! Son of a bitch. I don't even know if that laughing was you or if that was a sound effect.
That was me.
Okay.
No. This is. That's this thing laughing. Just so you know.
Very sexy potato. You are the winner. So I will sign this. If you were watching this, send me a PM on the site. If not, I will reach out to you and I will sign this and I will send this out post haste. But that was our winner, and maybe we'll see if we can rotate the others. But the people have decided, and Alex, you decided as well. So
yes,
2-1, I lose. We need to end this show as soon as humanly possible. Well, I thank everyone for tuning in yet again. It sounds like there were some audio sync issues that were only remedied if you were watching in 720p. I don't know what that means. So apologies, but the version that goes up on the site won't have those issues. Worst case, I will fix them in Adobe Premiere before it goes up. And then there will also be the podcast that goes up as well that has the higher quality audio. But I don't know if we'll have it on Monday. I don't know how regular it's going to be, but we are definitely going to try and have some guests on more often. And I think we'll try and have the guests on Mondays when, we can't guarantee that there's a whole lot that happened over the weekend.
Right. Usually there's not, so...
Yeah, if people have suggestions, feel free to reach out. But we'll start thinking about that and try and book in some folks going forward. But yeah, in that case, we have our winner. The weekend is almost here. What are you working on this weekend for next week?
Madden. Got to play a whole bunch of Madden, and then somewhere in there, I gotta try and hopefully fit in some actual games I want to play, like Saints Row and Gone Home and all that stuff. So I'll do what I can, where I can, when I can, but I'm going to be playing a whole lot of Madden this weekend.
Well, the nice part is once you kind of get that out of the way, there's not a whole lot coming out in between now and Grand Theft Auto. So there's sort of a 2-week period where it's like, all right, can I beat Saints Row? Can I maybe check out Splinter Cell, which seems to be the game that went completely ignored.
What is coming out before
Lost Planet 3.
No.
That is coming out next week, though.
That is coming out next week. That wasn't what I was talking about.
Okay.
In 2 weeks. Rayman Legend.
Fuck, really?
Yes.
And
very end of August.
Outlast comes out next week, too, which is
shit!
A horror game that got a lot of attention at E3 for being a PS4 game, but the PC version comes out next week, and I may actually have a code in my inbox at some point today. So, maybe there is way more. Damn it, there's way more coming out than I thought. Maybe there's a period of maybe nothing comes out after Grand Theft Auto, but I'm sure that's a really short game. I'm sure that's not 45 hours. That gets really tiring about 20 hours in.
No, not at all.
That was unnecessarily snarky. I'm probably gonna really enjoy that game. But yes. I just wish Grand Theft Auto. I just wish Rockstar Stories were half the length that they are. But in any case, if you notice on the front page of the site. there is a teaser for the Bioforge interview. Ken Demarest, the designer, director, producer, programmer, he had all sorts of hats on that game. We had a good long chat. The podcast is ready to go on Monday morning. I transcribed our interview. That's that entire interview, which is just going to be the whole thing. I was going to kind of do a story like I normally do, but I think for Bioforge, you guys should hear everything we talked about. So that'll go up on Monday as well. And then PAX happens, which you are going to be there.
Yes, as are you. So we will both be there.
So yeah, we will do a Monday show, but we will not do a Friday show, and then I suspect we will not do a Monday show after that because we should be able to enjoy our day off.
I agree.
But let's say we'll do one on Tuesday.
Maybe, yeah. We'll find somewhere early in that week to do something.
Yeah. So yeah.
And if you haven't had a chance to check it out yet, there is a couple interviews on the site regarding wrestling, both with Corey Ledesma, who's the head dude from 2K on that game, and also with a bunch of wrestlers. I put a bunch of wrestlers on the website that I talked to, including Stone Cold Steve Austin, Mick Foley, and Daniel Bryan. You should listen to those if you can. I
never thought that I would want to go subscribe to a Steve Austin podcast.
He's really good. He's really good at it. I was surprised.
Yeah, very strange.
Yeah.
In any case, we'll leave it there. Thanks everyone for tuning in, and Alex, I will talk to you and then see you next week.
Ow!
God damn it.